am Lily Cornell Silver. I am going live, doing a one-to-one with my mom, Susan Silver, today. And she's going to be joining from my Instagram. Let's bring her in.
Hi, baby.
How are you, Mom? For real. That's a Mark Brackett question. How are you?
Right, that's right. I am excited and nervous and honored. Definitely honored to be part of this amazing series that Mental Health Coalition is doing. It's really a very, uh, very special to be here with you, who I miss so much. I haven't been in a room with you for a month, a real room, not a virtual
Not a
room.
month.
It's a long time.
Well, I miss you.
I miss you. How are you? How are you?
I am overall good. I'm a little bit sick and I'm fully vaccinated. I've gotten my test. But I think this is the first time I've been sick since COVID started. Now that the world's opening back up, and I've noticed a lot of anxiety around that. So doing my best to check in with myself. I want to introduce myself to anyone who's watching from the Mental Health Coalition page that doesn't know. I'm Lily Cornell Silver. This is my beautiful mom, Susan Silver, and I have a mental health focused interview series on my Instagram page, which my mom is joining us from, called Mind Wide Open, with the goal of destigmatizing mental health and normalizing conversations around mental health. And I feel so lucky to be able to talk to my mom about mental health today, because she's a huge reason why I launched it. She's a huge reason why I've been able to do the series at all. And because the goal of it is destigmatizing mental health, a big part of that for me is thinking about why I feel like I'm able to talk about mental health, and why I feel like I have the ability to be vulnerable and have the courage and the strength to be vulnerable as well. And I think that my mom is I know that my mom is a huge part of that, and a huge part of the reason why I am the way I am. So, introducing Susan Silver. I would love to start, Mom, by talking to you about what kind of conversations were had about mental health for you and your family growing up, if any. Like, how was mental health treated in your family when you were growing up?
I came from a generation whose parents, it was an anomaly if it was talked about in the house. I'm not saying that hasn't happened, but in our household, my parents were from the greatest generation, as they're referred to, and it's pull yourself up by your bootstraps and don't complain and get out there and work hard and keep moving forward. Keep moving forward part is it's a great value to have, but there was a lot swept under the rug, including some pretty serious mental health challenges with both my brothers and probably my parents too, and they they masked it with hard work and alcohol and fighting, and it really wasn't an open discussion.
Yeah, that is something that I've just, in doing this series, I've had a lot of people that are in your generation talking about how mental health wasn't even, like, they didn't even know that it was a thing because it wasn't discussed in their households at all. And it's something that that experience for them influenced the way that they treated mental health in their parenting once they had kids. So coming from our relationship, where I feel that mental health is something that was discussed from a very early age, did your experience growing up in a family where mental health wasn't talked about affect the way that you treated mental health in parenting?
It did. I was a pretty sensitive kid, really empathetic, and felt impacted by some of the chaotic behaviors in the house, and had two little brothers, one of whom started self-medicating from a very young age, and then that became the identified problem in the house. But I could really feel what was going on in the house, and it was difficult sometimes. And I was the oldest child, so there was that syndrome that we have as the oldest child in the house, feeling responsible to fix it. Also being a Cancerian, I was very sensitive to everybody's suffering as well. One experience that comes to mind, noticing that I would feel different during full moons, for example.
Mm.
So I really started to pay attention to how the ebbs and flows of behaviors of the other household members were. And my little brother, who had I would say, a lot of depression and some rage issues. There was a lot of conflict with my dad. So it was pretty early on that he started self-medicating. And then my focus became how to help him, how to navigate his life with our parents, how to navigate his life with drugs.
And at that point, were you viewing that as a mental health issue, or was the family seeing it as like it's an addiction with the mental health part kind of taken out of that?
The family definitely just saw it as the identified problem was addiction.
Right.
There was no connection to mental health. And I started learning in my late teens, and he began to go through rehabs, and then you have family counseling and family time in groups. And so a language started to develop around tenets of the mental health component of addiction. But within family structure, it wasn't identified as what I see as depression, what I could see him as depression. Very sensitive, incredibly highly right brain sensitive human that had a really hard time dealing with the harshness of the world. Mm-hmm. He became the first in a long line of very sensitive, artistic people in my life, your dad included.
And you and I have talked about your experience with your brother being one of the factors that contributed to you wanting to have kids in general.
Well, my little brother sadly didn't for the listeners, he didn't win the battle. He lost his life to drugs in 1996, and at the end of the year, Christmas. So that's a life-changing experience. He was my kindred spirit. He and I were very connected souls, and so a lot of soul searching happened after. And your dad and I knew we wanted to have kids. That was just a given, but we were so caught up in our busy lives and growing careers that, yeah, we'll do it later. Well, that's the sort of life experience that really makes you evaluate what matters. Mm-hmm. And in that, in the depth of my grief, I felt like he was still with me, and in there, I started to hear of myself, of wherever the messages were coming from, that it's time to fulfill that next chapter of our lives and start our family. And didn't happen quite as quickly or as easily as anticipated. So you are my miracle, baby. You are my miracle. My many years journey to this miraculous being that you are. So that's the connection of how the loss in my life helped me reevaluate and go on that path to bring you here.
Mm-hmm. And when I think about my childhood, I think about, between you and me, like emotional wellness and mental health is something that we'd always talked about. Like, I don't really feel like there was a certain experience that happened that was like, oh, we need to address Lily's mental health. Like, I feel like kind of emotional wellness is something that was on the table for as long as I can remember. But I guess I'm curious, like, what was because I don't know what it's like to be a parent. Like, were you thinking about that before you had me? Like, this is how I want to talk about mental health as a mother. This is how I want to create a space. Like, how did that look for you?
I don't think the term mental health was something that we were talking about. It just wasn't in our vernacular. I've learned I've learned a lot of language from you and from what's going on in the world now. So the most important thing for me, before you were born, was instilling in you compassion. Compassion was the first and foremost value, experience, feeling that that I would hope that that you would carry into your life. And so I don't know if you remember when you were little, there was, little kids experiment with pushing envelopes, and there's a developmental point, what can I get away with? And
Mm-hmm.
I would always ask you, how does that feel in your heart?
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel in your heart? So that was a dialogue that we had early on. How do you feel about that? How do you feel that you, whatever the little thing was, the white lie, or the sneaky this, or the just to help you identify your feelings in your connected with your behaviors. And by that time, you got to remember, I was 42 when I had you. So I'd had a fair amount of life experience and dealt with, by that time, a lot of people that struggled and suffered. So it gave me time to evaluate what was important. It gave me tools to think about what I would hope to bring to my child's life that will help them in their life and help their path be one where there isn't so much suffering. And so compassion, and the big umbrella on over all of it is for you to feel loved and safe. And that was foremost in my mind. I don't know that I had a language about mental health as much about, I always wanted you to feel loved and safe and help you develop compassion.
And I think about too, something that you and I have talked about is the fact that I, from what I remember, started therapy when I was 7. And I've talked about this in my series in Mind Wide Open, that I attribute so much of my ability to talk about mental health. I attribute so much of my vocabulary about my own experience. I attribute so much of my, lack of shame and like feeling a lack of stigma around my own mental health, to having been in therapy from a really young age. Because I feel like being in a space where I was able to learn those words and understand my experiences and not feel shame or fear around my own experiences was so important. But what was your thought process behind that? Because if the idea of mental health wasn't something that was, or the words mental health wasn't something that was necessarily at the forefront at that time, because I was born in 2000 and so much has changed in the last 20 years, like for that being at the forefront of conversation, what were the contributing factors to you putting me in therapy?
I had started therapy from the time I was probably your age, on and off through the years. I've found a lot of value in it. I also started meditating when I was 17, just happened to be in the right place where some people were teaching transcendental meditation. They actually came to our high school. So there were tools that I had in mind that I wanted you to experience. But really what pushed it to start, for me to have you start so young, is that you started self-harming. And it's just terrifying. It's terrifying for a parent to to see that. And that's way beyond my skill set. As much as I would want you to have other tools, that's dangerous. And I needed to get professional help. And so that was the beginning of your journey with that. And what I've learned through seeing you through the various times you've been in therapy with different people is you listened and you learned and you remembered and you soaked it up. So it 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 felt like money well spent, and you 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 absorb the value in it, and you really, um, you've taken it to a place where now you are using it to be of service, which is so above and beyond. I would have only hoped that it would help you personally, and it feels like it has, and it does, and it will continue to, and you absorbed it and are helping other people with what you've learned. So that's a real gift.
I think for me, with therapy, just from what I've learned about mental health, especially mental health in young people, there tends to be kind of a, like when you're struggling emotionally or when you've had family issues or some kind of trauma, and Mark, when he comes in later, can correct me if I'm wrong, but that it tends to be that younger people will either internalize it, like they'll process it in an internal way or an external way, and like external looks more like aggression or having like behavioral issues. Sorry, Billy's timer went off again. So external looks more like behavioral issues and anger, and then internal looks more like what we talked about with like the self-harm and
More time.
Whoops. Oh, can you hear me, Mom?
Yes.
Okay, good. The external looks more like the aggression side, and internal looks more like what we talked about with like self-harm and like emotionally like beating myself up and kind of going inside.
Right.
So I feel like therapy was very helpful for me in that sense, because for that reason, is because I was internalizing so much of my feelings and what I was going through and feeling like it was my fault. So I don't know if that's something that you witnessed, but I think that that's where therapy was most helpful to me.
Yeah, very much. I mean, you had a lot of said a lot of sort of negative self-talk that was concerning, and then the physical self-harming was definitely internalized. Yeah. Taking on a responsibility that wasn't yours, really. Right. So yeah.
I wonder too about, this is something we've talked about a little bit, but in your life and in your career especially, you've been around so many people that have struggled with mental health and severe addiction, and many that lost their lives to addiction. And the trauma that comes from that is absolutely a real thing. And I'm wondering if that, created fear around being a mom, or kind of like a heightened sense of like not wanting me to go down that path, or how that manifested for you in parenting.
Absolutely. I think with every parent, can't help but worry. That's part of the job. So what I saw as the responsibility, and this comes from attachment parenting model, which is there's parts of it that are really valuable, which is the parent's job is to be bigger, wiser, stronger, and kind at all times. That is that responsibility to make you feel safe. So I know what's going on. So I know you didn't have to have risky behaviors hidden away that especially as we become adolescents, there's so much going on brain-wise that we definitely didn't want you to feel that you had to hide whatever you were going through. Does that answer the question? Does that feel like what you asked?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's so important, just when it came to, especially like the genetic stuff that I have, like from both sides of the family, like addiction runs on both sides of the family, and how, it would have been easy for me to go down a self-medicating path when it came to my mental health. Because for those who don't know, I struggle with depression and anxiety and PTSD in recent years. And that self-medication is a self-medication in a negative way is a pretty common thing that people do to deal with that.
Absolutely. And that, I was very well aware of that possibility by time you were born. So I would say hypervigilant in that way to make sure that I was monitoring your behavior, and also giving you tools. As you know, meditation was really invaluable to me as a tool. So I took you after your 15th birthday to the Chopra Center, and we both learned there the Chopra method of meditation, which is based in TM, and not that I expect you to meditate every day, but it's part of the toolbox, along with biofeedback and EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is tapping, it's such a quick, easy thing to do, or bilateral stimulation, to get a little kid in distress going with some bilateral stimulation is when they call the butterfly, and it changes the neural pathway being stuck. And I saw those things work miracles for you sometimes, because there was a lot of emotions that you were processing, and there was some times where you were in deep distress, and I saw miraculous results from you doing tapping and bilateral stimulation. So I felt like my responsibility was to give you tools, and then while you're an adolescent going and growing, you have to incorporate them with some guidance, and then you're on your own. What works for you, what doesn't work for you. I don't mean on your own. I mean, obviously we're here on this journey together, and it's a lifelong commitment. But I mean, in terms of your daily life, and you're in college, and you're feeling stressed about something, what tool are you going to pull out of your bag to help you through the day? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a parent's responsibility, is to show some options. Modeling behavior is one part of it, but also filling that toolbox, and then the child decides. There's a time in mid-adolescence where you were having a lot of emotional highs and lows, and then the universe provided right there in 2013. A terrific book came out by Dr. Daniel Siegel called Brainstorm, and it was a 25-year study on the adolescent brain. He watched his own two sons from the time they were 12 to 24 develop, and then he, along with lots of other adolescents, of course, but he put together such a terrific book, and I had an opportunity to see him speak, and it was so spot on in terms of those highs and lows, and gave me so much compassion, remembering how much goes on in the adolescent brain. There's so many hormones and chemicals, and it's a wild ride. It is really a wild ride. And so having some knowledge and wisdom around that to help you through that period. As adolescents can, some of the hormones can take kids into really risky behaviors, like you were referencing before, where it can be internalized or it can be externalized, and especially when there's excess testosterone involved, it can be a very dangerous situation.
Will you book one more time? I think there's a couple people in the chat.
Okay, it's called Brainstorm. How perfect. It's just what happens in the adolescent brain. It's a chemical feast going on. So
and as an adolescent too, I remember because I circumstantially, genetically, but also just being a teenager, I struggled a lot with emotions. I struggled with regulating my emotions. I struggled a lot with emotional outbursts and with anxiety, and those things felt very real, because they were very real, like that emotional high, it felt super real. So when it was to have some people, as people do in your life, say like, oh, like you're such a moody teen, like nothing felt worse to me than hearing that, like, because it feels so invalidating. so having a parent and someone like you that took the time to understand what that was, like I made such a world of difference to me, and really treated all of those times as something serious that I was trying to get through, versus like, oh, you need to, like, you're just a moody teen, like, calm down, like, you're being bratty, you know, that, and that's something that I've seen many parents do, and it's understandable, you know, especially like when you're trying to raise that child and they're taking it out on you, is,
Right.
I imagine, very frustrating.
It's a fine line too, because
Right.
we're human as well. And the thing I keep in mind first and foremost: patience, 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 love, compassion, patience. It's the hardest job in the world, being a parent, and then especially being a single parent. It's very tiring. And I bowed down to the single moms in the world, and especially those with multiple kids. And we are so blessed to have a village around us, and that was an important part of you know, of our life. And when I was struggling at times, because I had postpartum, and for, you know, it was a real struggle the first year for me, and then as our life changed and your dad and I split up, then okay, all right, this is going to be a journey that I need to make sure there's, you know, the African proverb, it takes a village, which Hillary brought to awareness in her book. It takes a village, and society now, we are really sort of isolated. We're all our individual capsules, and having those girlfriends that a mom can reach out to, or the family members that will take your kids for an overnight once in a while. It's so essential. It truly just does take a village. But let's see, I lost my train of thought. Where were we on that?
We're
before.
out, you know, as you being a single mom, like the intensity of having intense teenage emotions and how you dealt.
Right. So then you get to that stage, and the brainstorm happens, and patience, patience, patience. But you also have to have boundaries, because sometimes, you know, your behavior, it's like whatever, every button in my being was being slugged. It's like, okay, I'm out of patience, girl. All right.
Right.
I'm out of patience. And, you know, you're 16 years old. It's not exactly like, I'm putting you on a timeout.
Right.
It's like, no, this is not okay. I am not going to continue this discussion in this way. I'm creating a boundary for myself here. So please know that I've heard you, and but I'm not going to continue this conversation right now. So patience is,
and that's a tool, obviously, at 16. Like, I don't want to hear that, but that is is a tool that I've used in my own life, whether that's recognizing for me, like when I'm in an emotional space that I am not going to be the best person to have a conversation with, or when, you know, you've seen me utilize this in my own relationships, that it's like the way that you're speaking to me, I'm not going to accept that, and I'm setting my boundary around, you know, the fact that we're going to pause this and come back to this conversation in another time when emotions aren't so heightened and we can be a little bit more regulated.
Yeah.
So that's been, you know, as frustrating as I remember that being for both of us, it's been a very important tool to have modeled for me.
Great. And you taught me so much. You know, I didn't know the term, I don't feel validated. And that was something you said early on. And like, oh, I don't know what that means, but I better go figure it out. And ask you, when cooler heads prevailed, you know, what did that mean exactly? And so I have learned so much from you, my darling. Absolutely incredible amounts of you know, vocabulary, vernacular, ideas, and this great big heart that you've modeled with the community that you have created. It's pretty dang inspiring. It's really so proud of you.
Thank you.
Proud of you.
I want, just the topic that we're on right now, I wanted to add something. that for those who don't know, I've been doing this weekly series on this app called Quilt that's an audio only social network focused on well-being. And it's so incredible, and I've learned so much from that. But I did a talk a few weeks ago with one of my childhood friends, with Flora, mom. And we talked about being kids who struggled with mental health from a young age. Like we both kind of struggled with anxiety and even depressive symptoms from a very young age. And we're both in therapy because we had the privilege of having access to it from a very young age. And a few people on that quilt were asking us, as parents, what could, what do you wish your parents would have known? What do you wish your parents could have done better, or would have had different skills when you were younger? And then they also asked the reverse, like, what's something that you wish you had a better understanding of when you were going through that as a kid? And something that Flora and I were talking about is, which I guess kind of answers both questions, is having those conversations about how both of us should deal when I'm in those times of emotional crisis, outside of those times of emotional crisis, like having those conversations outside of those times of emotional crisis. Because I feel like there were so many times where I was in that really heightened state, and then you would be wanting to know, like, what can I do? What do you need? And I was not in a place where I could answer that question, and then that feels personal, that feel like you're frustrated because I'm not communicating. But that communication for me, like, that's how I am when I'm in emotional crisis, and when I'm really heightened, is that I can't communicate. A lot of the times I'm nonverbal, and a lot of the times for me too, I'm really overstimulated and kind of sensitive to touch, which is normally not how I am in day-to-day life. So like, you would touch me to try to soothe me and I would freak out, and then that obviously would feel personal to you, but when in reality it's just that's how I react when I'm overstimulated, which is a pretty common thing to happen when you're overstimulated. So just the conclusion that Flora and I came to is that idea of these conversations about what to do when your kid is in emotional crisis need to happen when they're not in emotional crisis.
Right.
And as my therapist, my neurofeedback therapist, actually said to me the other day, like, you can't take swim lessons when you're drowning. You can't teach yourself to swim when you're drowning. And I think that's
Great analogy. And you and I had talked about
right.
How do we, I'm sure you remember when you were doing biofeedback practice, when you're not, just practice. It's just like piano. Just go do it. So then when you really want to
right.
put it to use, then you have muscle memory.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And one of the tools I'm thinking about, other times when you're really in crisis, and certainly losing your dad just before you turned 16 was there's no bigger trauma. And there was a
17.
Right. Well, you're just about to turn 17. Yeah. The month before.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see you shutting down, which was very terrifying. So I remember we were laying in bed one night, and the higher power around me said, she's got to move her body. She's got to move some of this trauma before it starts to lock in. And movement had become such an important part of my healing journey, dance in particular, that we were laying there, and I said, baby, let's talk about what would be good for you to do where you can start moving your body. And we started going through the list. So how about, would you like to jog? You were just so empty, and it was like, okay, how about swimming? How about yoga? And you were just not engaging. And I said, how about boxing? And you just literally sat up in bed. Yes, boxing. I want to do boxing. And it's like, all right. And made it a couple calls. And once again, just thank God, the doors open, and we were introduced to an absolutely remarkable woman who is a boxing coach plus, and she was actually on your on Mind Wide Open this
I was going to
week.
say, most recent interview on Mind Wide
Yeah,
Open.
yeah.
You didn't watch it.
To see you start to unfreeze some of that and work through that trauma in that first year was such a gift. So part of it is what we learn, and part of it, if parenting, part of it is what we learn and study, and part of it is our instincts, and we have to rely on our instincts and paying attention to our connection with our kids to say what is it they need at this time. And that was a powerful one. That was a powerful delivery.
I think about that a lot. Just that the old adage of time heals all wounds, and when it came to grief, and obviously, I mean, that has been like the most major trauma in my life as well. So that kind of grief element mixed with the post-traumatic stress element really proved that to be wrong for me. That the idea of time heals all wounds, I think, especially in the US, we live in this society that's like, okay, just compartmentalize, like keep doing what you have to do, ignore it, and as time goes by, it'll get easier. And so that was kind of, even though I've had all these resources and all this amazing help and support from you, we've also all been conditioned by the society that we live in that's like, okay, every day should get easier. And as I've gone through this journey, I've learned grief is nonlinear, and that's like the grief is nonlinear, like that's like the tagline. But it really, when it came to boxing and when I started doing things like that to externalize, that really proved to me it's not as much about time, even though time can be helpful. It's more about when you take those deliberate steps towards healing, when you set aside that time and set aside those tools and resources to externalize and to process and to heal. And so that really helped me feel more empowered to take those steps and make that space for myself instead of just kind of waiting for something to get better. Because that was where I was kind of in that.
It's a really good point, in empowering and recognizing where you are on your journey, and the incremental steps that the ever important self-care will give you. They will deliver. And after something as traumatic as that, and you know how I feel about this, God bless you, Kelly Clarkson, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Bullshit. It just
I don't think Kelly Clarkson made it.
I know, she just made a song out of it. It's been around for a while, but it's it just makes you different. It creates different spaces in you, and I truly believe strengthens your compassion.
Definitely. Well, as we wrap up and invite Mark Brackett to join us, is there anything you want to add? Anything you might want to say to parents with kids who struggle with mental health or may struggle with mental health, or single parents, single moms, anything like that?
Yeah, well, single moms, good on you. It's you're doing a miraculous job, and for every parent, it's patience, it's compassion, it's giving your kids tools to take along in their life journey. It's planting seeds, if you will, give them enough seeds, and they're going to grow all the nourishing tools that they need.
And if I had to take
patience.
Besides patience, if I were going to have a takeaway from this conversation and just us talking about mental health and our relationship, the thing that I think influenced me the most and really helped me the most, and still continues to help me, because you're the person I call when I call you anyway, but you're the person I call it if I'm not doing well. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you for one-to-one, is that having a parent that genuinely listened to me is what changed things for me. It's what really made me, you're crying, you're making me cry. But it's true. It's true. It's really like, and I know that that's hard. And I've seen so many different parent relationships and you know, especially when you're the parent and you're just like, I just want you to understand this, and it can be so frustrating. But having a parent that really, like, even when I was 4, like, trying to tell you how I'm feeling and you genuinely listening to that.
Yeah. It goes so fast. We gotta take that time because it goes so fast. Y'all grow up so fast, and then you're on your own, and so, yeah. I love you, baby.
I love you too. So what we're gonna do now, the amazing thing about one-to-one is we're gonna have Dr. Mark Brackett from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence join us and give his commentary on our conversation. Yeah, y'all are gonna want to see this. There he is. Hi, Mark.
I feel like I just went through a master class on mother-daughter bonding. Seriously, it was incredibly insightful and just beautiful. So thank you both for just being who you are and sharing so much. And I feel like it's like I was like the voyeur, like I'm listening into your conversation and taking all these notes on your conversation and thinking like, oh, what can I actually share with people, you know, that's more comprehensive than, you know, what you were all talking about. And I you know, a few things I just want to say up front is, one, that you know, you both have had like big lives, right? From, you know, fame to loss to trauma, and you talked a lot about resilience. And I just think it's important for everybody on this Instagram Live to realize that we're not born resilient. Like everything you talked about, Susan, is like you were like this hungry mother, like learning everything you possibly could to make sure that your daughter had the best possible mental health. And so it's just so obvious from everything you said, you know, I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm trying this strategy, this toolbox. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to run and learn to talk to this therapist. No, I'm going to bring my daughter to boxing. No, I'm going to do this. But it really is that model of like whatever it takes. And so I just think it's important for people to know that, you know, like it's never going to be one strategy. Like you need that toolbox you were saying, like you need lots of strategies. And so God bless you for like looking for those strategies and, you know, and making sure that you taught them to your daughter, because it's obviously made a huge difference. Just two other things I'm going to say, and then maybe we can just talk a little bit. One is that given, you know, all the mental health, you know, challenges that you both witnessed and experienced, it just makes me ever so realize, you know, that we have to think like preventionists and not interventionists. You know, our society, you know, people make a killing off of interventions, right? And it's like, let's just wait till the person has PTSD. Let's just wait till the person has an anxiety disorder. Let's wait till they're depressed. Wait till they have, you know, a violent episode. And so I think you both know, obviously my whole career is built on the fact that let's start in preschool. If I had it my way, we'd start in the womb, just to be honest. Right, because how moms feel, you know, while they're holding those babies, or not babies, but, you know, fetuses, influences the child's, you know, development. And so, like, think about it in terms of every child from preschool were learning the words to talk about their feelings, right? Growing up in families where people asked them how they felt and really cared and listened, where parents were, you know, curious and exploring strategies that would be the most helpful for their kid. And one thing that you also brought up, Lily, too, is that it's not a one size strategy fits all, right? It's like you're sensitive to touch, you're sensitive to different things. And so like, it's not just like, here's your strategy, right? It's like, let me explore what strategy works best, you know, for my child. And it may not be the same one that works best for me. And so we tend to want people to use the strategies that we like, as opposed to the ones that are best for them. And so I think that's something else. And the last thing I just want to say is, as I was thinking about everything that you said and did, both of you, um, I was thinking about like, there's like, I'm going to call it my 4-step process. Um, and like the first is, as a parent, when you have a child who is, whether they're engaging in self-harm or they're having a panic attack or they're anxious, right? You've got to be calm, right? You like, because it's painful, right? I mean, I, as a mom, to watch someone suffer like your child, there's nothing worse than that. And so obviously you get activated from that, because then it's yourself talking, oh my God, this is my fault, this is my response, And so like for moms and dads and anybody who lives or works with anybody, right? Just trying to find out that way to deactivate, whether it be that meditation, that breathing exercise, taking a walk, pinching yourself, right? Whatever it is, to just deactivate, because that's the only way you can be present. You can't be present, when your brain is in fight flight mode. And then to me, the second step, right, is that unconditional love that you were talking about, that validation that you were talking about, is like, there's no such thing as a bad emotion. There's no such thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our feelings are our feelings. And so as a parent, being that, like, as I call it, the compassionate emotion scientist, right? Just going in there and like trying to find out, like, what's my daughter's experience? And then of course, finding the strategies, that work best for your child. And the last thing I think I want to say is, people I think, well, oh, she's okay now, so I can go back to being busy and going to work and like, it's fine. And as you know, like, things repeat. This is a journey of our lives. And so that ongoing bonding and connection and follow up for people, just check in regularly with this stuff. And I mean, I don't want to just be like Mr. Professor tonight. So that was my spiel based on what I heard from you, and it was just really, really special. I just want to say that.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
witnessing us and reflecting back.
I want to ask you a question now. So, Susan, what is your like go-to self-talk? Like when things aren't going well for you, like, and you notice the self-critic come out, like, where does your, like, what do you do to support yourself in being more self-compassionate? That's for both of you, by the way.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dr. Brackett.
Because you obviously do it. You may not be conscious of it.
Yeah, because I am internally much harder on myself than I am on anybody else.
So that's where I get it. Okay.
I thought I was hiding. I guess it's, let's see. I will reflect, do a little inventory. Like, okay, well, I've had been in dark spaces and made my way out of it. So I have at least have that capacity. I have a strong compassion muscle, so I have that capacity. I don't really have a good answer, and I'm going
There's
to
one thing that taught me, Mom, if I can, if you maybe don't remember, but there was like as I got into my teenage years, struggling more with anxiety, something that you said that you would repeat to yourself as a mantra was, I am safe, my baby is safe, life is beautiful, all is well. Is that okay? That's one.
Yeah, that's true. So to have that sort of neurolinguistic change, as I'm stuck in thinking about the what do I say to myself, I know what I do, which is to get extra busy and distracted. And if I'm really in a healthy headspace, then I'll do a NIA class, which is my go-to for centering and grounding, combination of dance, martial arts and healing arts like yoga and great music. I really have to think about what what I tell myself. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing though, again, is that you use a wide range of strategies, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one was like you recognize that that feeling is impermanent, that you've had darks and you've had rainy days and sunny days, and in the rainy days tomorrow's going to be a sunny day, and so just reminding yourself of that. It's the social support, it's the music, it's the yoga, it's the meditation, and so you've got a lot to go to. Distraction is a great strategy. Honestly, I just wrote about that yesterday because like I can ruminate. I have anxiety for my whole life. And like sometimes I'm just like, this is just your general anxiety. You're not going to solve this problem. Go bake a cake. Go take a walk. just get your mind off of it. And that's fine.
I was lucky to understand, primarily through the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross about death, that denial is a safety mechanism. So when we really don't have the capacity because I'm overstimulated and I can't process through it, if I go unconsciously into denial, then it's my body saying I can't assimilate all that right now, and I'll get back to myself when I have a wider capacity.
Yeah, which is also fine. You give yourself the permission to just be with your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to say if there's one master strategy, like I said, there's no bad emotions. And we need to give ourselves that permission to feel all of our feelings because it's life. And they're not to be judged, they're to be cherished and embraced. How about you, Lily? Just before we wrap up, why don't you share with people your go-to strategies?
For sure. Yeah, distraction is for sure one of those. But I spent a long time feeling really bad about that, like feeling like I'm not doing it. I'm not doing mindfulness. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it wasn't until I went through like a really difficult breakup and our closest family friends, who's a trauma expert, was like, okay, here's a list of podcasts you have to listen to that are just fun, like that you don't have to think about anything, like don't let your mind go on that loop. And I was like, oh my God, like that's so validating to hear that I don't have to 24 hours a day just sit with this. And I'm the same way, Dr. Brackett, like having my thoughts loop and feeling really, with intense anxiety my whole life. Like that's kind of my default is obsessive thinking. So, having that validated, like it's okay to have those moments of distraction is really important. But as far as like self-talk, nothing is permanent is the thing that I come back to a lot. And I had another one I was going to say, but that's the main one, is that nothing is, I've gotten.
There's a lot of stuff in the chat about that. I'm just going to give one suggestion to everybody. Mm-hmm. When we're feeling intense emotions, we tend to become very inward, and many of us catastrophize, right? We ruminate, we perseverate. So one strategy is it's called distancing. And so what you do essentially is instead of saying I, you actually talk to yourself in the third person. You say, Mark, you can get through this. Mark, this feeling is impermanent. And so by literally talking to yourself, it helps you downregulate that feeling. So that's one suggestion for everybody.
Great idea. Thank you.
And I saw someone.
It's showing compassion for yourself.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I saw someone in the comments say that they wash their face with cold water. And I've been working with Dr. Ursula Whiteside, who's a DBT expert, and she goes through the things like really easy, not easy, but simple things you can do when you're on fire is what she calls it. And one of those is like putting an ice pack on your neck or getting in a cold shower. So those kind of things that like regulate your nervous system is something that I've relied on really heavily.
Cool. Well, it was great to see you. I feel like just honored to be with both of you, and I'm always in learning mode, and now I've got like more ideas, and so that's always great too. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And for being on Lily's show. That was,
Of course.
that was.
I was an early guest.
Yeah. Number 2, right, Lil?
Yep. And everyone's like, I learned a lot, and I still talk about it all the time.
All the time.
I appreciate that.
She's dropping your bits of knowledge all the time.
In like every episode since then, I'm like, well,
By now you should be calling me Mark, by the way. It's embarrassing that you call me Dr. Buggins.
throw them in there a little bit.
So should we invite our spoken word poet?
Yes. So to finish up with this amazing conversation, we're going to welcome Asia Mayrock, who is an incredible spoken word poet. And let me add her. Oh, there she is. Okay, I'm sending the request whenever you're ready, Asia. There she is.
Hi.
Hello.
Asia.
Hi. Thank you all so much for your vulnerable and powerful conversation. That was amazing. And I learned so much, and I was taking notes on my end.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. So should I jump in?
Please, yeah, please.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Asia Mayrock. I am a poet and a writer. And today I wrote a piece after working on this month of one-to-ones with the Mental Health Coalition called In Her Shoes. And I wanted this piece to kind of talk about one, a letter to people trying to understand the complexity of mental health and how sometimes it's hard to understand what someone is going through and what it's like in their shoes. And then on the other end, you know, what I, as someone who has also struggled with mental health, would hope that other people struggling will choose to do. So here we go. In her shoes, you will see life in a very different light. Picture perfect it would not be. A mile in her shoes and you will see the might it takes each morning to rise from bed. The smile that hides all the thoughts in her head. Imagine that you cannot imagine. We are all different, unfinished, sufficient. We all fight our own battles each day. We all must be accepting of our wounds that don't always fade away. And so in time, I have learned, if you are wounded, choose healing. If you think you are drowning, choose healing. If you feel broken beyond repair, choose healing. Seek healing with each and every mountain you climb. That's it.
Yeah. Woo, powerful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So great. So great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asia. I can't believe Mental Health Month is already coming to an end, but I really love hearing art that's come from this. I think there's been a lot of really amazing conversations on mental health this month and amazing resources, but I've also seen a lot of beautiful art come from this month, and I love that's part of your path. That's beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you all for all of your, I think it can be so scary to share so many parts of all of our stories. And thank you for your willingness to do that and that bravery, because it definitely helps people more than I'm sure we all know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so powerful, Asia. Thank you to
Have a
Dr.
great- I think now it's time for all of us to just like chill.
Yeah.
Good. All
It was
right.
great to be with everybody. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Grateful to be.
People are asking in the comments where to find us outside of this. So I don't know if all of our Instagram handles are on this or how. I've never done a live with this many people, but you can find me and my podcast at Lily Cornell Silver. This is my mom, Susan Silver, who doesn't have anything, but she should write a book soon.
She has everything. She just doesn't have social media handles.
She has social media. She has everything. Dr. Mark Brackett, you're Mark.Brackett, right? On Instagram.
On Instagram, yes.
Amazing book, Permission to Feel. And Asia, what's your people find you?
AIJAMAYROCK.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Mental Health Coalition. Thank you, One to One. This is a series, and we'll see you all again soon.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Bye.